Hi folks. So today I'm doing a review of Alien. Now it's not Alien Covenant, it's not Prometheus, it's not Alien versus Predator, it's just Alien. Now some of you might be saying, aren't you a little late with a review for that movie? And those people would be right because Alien came out in 1979. However, it's one of my favorite movies, and I just wanted to make a review of it for myself because I really enjoy this movie. I took some notes. I didn't want to just gush about this movie the whole time because, every movie has its problems, has its flaws. Overall, I think it's a great movie. I really enjoy it pretty much every time I watch it. You don't want to watch it 5 times in a row, but it was a great thing to see it again, and I really enjoyed it. The first thing I want to mention is I decided to watch the director's cut. It has a few extra scenes. I figured that was the best version to watch. And the Blu-ray that I have has both the theatrical version and the director's cut. So I went with the director's cut, just in case that makes it different. There's something that I have to mention, and it's the pacing of the movie. Now, it didn't particularly bother me because, I don't know, I just like the style of the movie. But I have to admit, the pacing in the movie is really slow. It takes forever for something to happen. There's a whole lot of build-up. But again, this didn't really bother me because it's really well done. It feels realistic in a sense. So that didn't take me out of the movie. However, when compared to more modern movies, there's no denying that this movie takes forever to get going. Another thing I want to mention is I thought a lot of the stuff here looked really good for 1979, but I don't know how much of that is the fact that I have it on Blu-ray. Because they might have touched up some things, and I just don't know because I didn't have the old version to compare it to. But from what I saw, a lot of it really held up, and I think that has to do with the fact that they just build all these sets, and that really makes it more lasting than 1979 CGI. Because occasionally they do use CGI, and it's just a disaster. So the movie starts, and we don't see any people. We just see the ship slowly waking up. And I have to say, even though it's old, I think they did a good job showcasing those computers. It's all complicated, and I think that's the best way to do it. It looks realistic. Obviously, these days, those computers would probably be running Windows and crashing all the time, but despite that, I think they did a good job portraying a spaceship. Something I noted is that when you look at those cryotubes, I feel like I wouldn't want to be in those cryotubes because I'm pretty tall. Either depending on what measurement system you use, I'm either 2 meters or 6'6", and I felt like I would not fit in that tube because some of the actors even looked like they were kind of uncomfortable in them. So I feel like space travel must only be for short people. But that could even be a real thing. And is it necessarily a just prop design? Maybe there's a reason for short people to be favored in space. I can't really think of anything, but it could be that there's actually a reason for that. But I'm definitely just filling in things there. But yeah, those cryotubes look pretty small to me and pretty claustrophobic. There's a small weak point in the movie where, okay, so they wake up from these cryotubes, then they all go to eat, then they go to the bridge, and they realize they're not in our solar system. Which I feel like, oh come on, if I came out of a cryotube, the first thing I would do is check the bridge, make sure everything's okay. But again, you could argue that maybe there are specific guidelines. You know, I don't know what the effects of cryostasis are. Maybe there's some medical rule that says if there's no immediate emergency, the crew has to eat before doing anything else. I could actually see that happening. Cryostasis could be really tough on the body. Maybe you need to eat something before you get to flying the ship. So even though I thought it was a bit weird, it could be explained away pretty easily. Something I wondered is about Mother. Is that a real AI? Because we know Ash is a form of AI. What about Mother? Because we don't really see a lot of it. And I feel like it's not. I feel like it's more of a advanced computer system, but not an actual AI. There is some doubt in my mind about that, because later on, Ripley speaks to Mother as if she were an AI and constantly listening. So the existence of AIs and whether or not Mother qualifies as one is an interesting question that I feel isn't really answered in this particular movie. I know that in one of the later movies, a ship seems to have more of a true AI, although even that doesn't seem to reach the level of AI that the synthetics show. So it's pretty much an unresolved question. Then there's the radio signal. I thought it was interestingly done. They play the radio signal for a moment, and it does sound alien, but not overly done. It's very subtle. It's just a small, like, and you know, you're kind of left wondering, like, well, was that even a signal? Is there even alien life there, or is it just, you know, a random sound? I like the ship design, especially when you see the way it detaches itself from the refinery. It has this really strong looking connection to the refinery to tug it. And I like that they did that. I like the fact that they put so much detail into it and so much thought into how you would actually go about pulling this refinery, which has to weigh a considerable amount. You can't just tug that like it's nothing. You would, you know, if you design it badly, you would pull yourself apart with that much weight. So I thought that was well done. And I like those kind of small details, which really add to the movie for me. Then there's the scene where they land on the planet, and I have to say it was kind of bad. Now I'm willing to forgive that because it's an old movie. They didn't have the CGI to make an awesome landing scene, so they did what they could, and because of that I'm going to forgive it. But the whole thing felt really awkward. There's, you know, the transitioning is weird, and there's these shots that don't really do it for me, and it just felt kind of awkward, but I get what they were going for, so it's fine. Then they're landed, and they're going to go out to the signal and investigate. There's an interesting moment where we see Ash, and he's, you know, getting ready, and he's like, which seems strange knowing what we know. Is he actually excited, or is he just pretending to be human, which is something he has to do, you know? Nobody knows that he's a synthetic. But I just wonder if that's acting, or if he's really excited. Which brings up another question. How much did he know? How much did the company know? Were they just interested in any alien life? Because any alien life would be valuable. There could be all kinds of medical advancement from discovering alien life. It would be immeasurably valuable, even if it was just some kind of space rat. Medical companies would still want that. But was that the situation? Or did they already know about the xenomorphs? And that question, as far as I know, is never really answered, whether or not they knew about the xenomorphs. Because what could have happened is the company could have already known about the space jockeys. Now, I'm going to ignore what happens in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, because I really like the old story better, where you had these space jockeys and they designed the xenomorphs. Now, you could say that happens in Prometheus too, but it's very different. I like the story of the old space jockeys who built this horrible weapon, which is engineered in a really clever way as far as I'm concerned, but then they lost control of it. Which, I don't know, I always really liked the space jockey angle. I was really sad when Prometheus just kind of swept that away. But in this movie, I'm going to stick with it because I can. There's the whole angle about the two guys on the ship who are not earning as much as the others. And I thought that was actually interesting because that would probably happen in real life. Where, you know, you have the officers, the people who fly and went to school, space school or whatever. And then you have these worker bees. And all they are there for is to do some, you know, technician work. And not to say that's not important. They might be the most important people on there, but they get paid less because they had less schooling. And I could totally see that happening. So that was interesting, and frankly, to me, it was really realistic. So the space jockey ship is interesting. I think they've struck a nice balance between looking alien, but still recognizable as a ship. So I thought they did well with that. And it's interesting how it's just kind of perched there, you know, like it crash landed, which is probably what happened, considering we know what killed the space jockey that was piloting it. Let's talk for a moment about the space jockey himself. I thought the design was always cool. I always liked it. But what I didn't remember is how huge that space jockey is. Because when you see the people standing next to him, he's huge. And, you know, that's interesting. There's nothing against that. And, of course, there's the, you know, the kind of hint to what's about to happen. A foreshadowing. Where, like, looks like his chest exploded from within. I do wonder what happened to the xenomorph that came out of the space jockey. Because we never really learned that. And I wonder if it could be out there. Some kind of xenomorph with maybe a trunk or something. But it is interesting. Because there had to have been a xenomorph coming out of, you know, his chest. That's probably why the ship crashed. Because he died. Now, you could say it probably died. Because, you know, this space jockey also died a long time ago. But I've always had the idea that xenomorphs can enter this sleeping stage. Where they can endure for a long time. Because they are so durable. So I wonder what happened to him. It would have been interesting to learn about that. I also thought it was interesting that when they go into the cargo bay, one of the people exploring it, I think it was Kane, says, it's like the tropics in here. which is interesting because the xenomorph eggs do look something that, you know, belongs in the tropics. Now, I actually do think that xenomorphs could survive in almost any environment, which is something Ash brings up later as well. But maybe they thrive the most in a tropical environment, which kind of makes sense to me, because tropical environments tend to be conducive to breeding and having great biodiversity. So that kind of makes sense. I have a note saying, when that egg opened, Kane is like, huh, I would have run. Even if I had never heard about xenomorphs in my life, when that egg opens, I would have been like, oh, screw this, I'm out of here. I'm on an alien ship with some kind of weird alien pilot who's exploded from the inside, and now I'm in like some kind of hatchery, and this weird egg opens. I'm gone. But, you know, Kane isn't gone. I do wonder, there's this like an energy barrier or something above the eggs. I wonder if that would have helped. What did that do? Did that just keep the eggs docile? Like, maybe they couldn't detect people through it? Or would it have actually stopped the facehugger in any way? I suspect not, because they are able to pull him out of there with the facehugger on him. So my personal theory is that it keeps the eggs from detecting anyone, and because of that they don't wake up, and then they're relatively safe to transport. Perhaps that malfunctioned at some point, and that's why one facehugger got out. You never know. Killed the pilot. Something else I want to mention is the detail they put into the facehugger is amazing. Now, there could be some of that added into the Blu-ray, but I don't think it was. Because I remember thinking this when I saw the original movie. And the detail they put into everything in this movie is just amazing. And I think that's why it became such a good movie, because the people working on it poured so much into it. It's not just the facehugger, it's not just the alien, it's not just the egg, but it's the ship itself. Everywhere there are buttons and lights, and you can just tell that so much work went into all of this. And I think that's amazing. I think that's part of why it's a good movie. Another interesting question is Ash really interested in taking this facehugger off? Or was he never really interested? Did he just want to see what happened? And I don't really have an answer for that. He does seem to be genuinely trying to get the facehugger off, but he also gives up pretty quickly. Then there's the whole thing that xenomorphs have acid for blood. And that, I always thought that was an amazing idea, because the xenomorphs, at least in my mind, are living weapons. They were designed either by whatever you want to call the Prometheus aliens or the space jockeys to be a weapon. And giving them acid for blood really increases their potential, because now you pretty much can't remove a facehugger. And even if they are facing, you know, enemies with guns and all of that, they still have weapons. We've seen them do this in future films, where some xenomorphs will kill another to use its blood to escape, or to enter something where otherwise perhaps they couldn't get into. So yeah, I thought that was a brilliant move. And it's so alien, yet it makes sense. There was a moment where I'm like, wait, did they just leave Kane there with a facehugger on his face all night? And apparently they do. They're just like, well, you know, this happened. Let's take a nap. We'll tackle this in the morning. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything, but I think that was weird. Although perhaps they had, Ash standing watch. That could have been the case. He does seem to have been studying. Again, I have a note about the set, but I kind of already talked about that. How much work went into all of these sets, and I love that. I love that level of detail. That really adds to the movie for me. They take off from the planet, and then they're back with the refinery. I do think it's a slight miss that they never show the ship docking back with the refinery. Because I know that I've talked to some people who got confused about all of that. They're like, wait, how big is this ship? It seems to be really big one moment and small the other moment. And I think that's because of this. They don't show the Nostromo docking back with the refinery. I think a small scene where you could just, put the other scene in reverse. I think that would have helped. But, I don't know, maybe the budget was gone. It's not a huge thing. I just think it would have made it a little clearer. Another question that's not really resolved is, did Ash know what the facehugger did after it falls off? Did he know Kane was infected and just wanted to see what happened? Or was he unaware? Because when they are having dinner, there's this moment, this small shot, and if they meant it like this, I think that would be amazing. But there's this shot where it seems like Ash is studying Kane with keen interest. And I wonder if that could be the case of, let's see what happens. Maybe he did know Kane was infected and he just wanted to see the result. Hell, for all we know, Ash had quite a bit of knowledge about the xenomorphs and knew exactly what was about to happen. So, next page. Obviously, the scene where the xenomorph breaks out is iconic. I think it's a good scene. There is a moment where it's a little bit silly, where the tiny little chest burster just moves across the table, but you don't see any feet or anything. But it's a good scene. It's amazing. There's a reason it became iconic. Of course, they split up, and one guy goes off on his own to get the cat. Of course, because it is a horror movie, and it always happens. But I have to say, that how long did it take for that xenomorph to go from chest burster to, or at least near full adult? Because it seems to happen really quick. Now, we don't know how long they've been searching in this refinery. But at most, let's say a day. And that's still a really quick time to go from chest burster to full xenomorph. Now, I have to say, it's still better than what happens in Prometheus later. Because there it's just completely ridiculous. So much that I actually was like, no, this is going too far. I can't believe this. But even here, they grow up ridiculously fast. But it's not quite to the point where it bugs me. There's the mention that I always thought this was this ominous moment where Ash calls the xenomorph Kane's son. And for some reason that always made me feel like, I don't know, there's something dark about that. But I can't honestly tell you why. It's just something about it. The xenomorph moves into the vents and they go after it. But I have to say, they have these, and it looks really cool. They have these vents where they close these metal, what do you call it? It's like a sphincter almost. And they close. But why is their vent so tough? like it's this metal thing that closes up, and I'm like, wow, you're really worried about things moving through your vents when you design the ship. That does seem a little convenient, but there might be a reason for it. Maybe it has to do with decompression. I could totally see that. So it might actually not be any kind of plot hole. It very well could make sense. There is something that didn't really make sense to me. When they go out to investigate the ship, someone says, break out the weapons. And Kane seems to have some kind of pistol when he inspects the egg. But that's never mentioned again. Now, it could be that that's because of the acid blood. Because shooting that alien could be a really bad idea when you're on a spaceship in space. On the other hand, at some point, when half the crew is dead, personally, I would have said I'd rather deal with the decompression than deal with this alien. Because he is a tough, SOB. There's this moment after Dallas is taken by the alien where they say, we didn't find any blood and we didn't find Dallas. That, in the original movie, that was just scary. But in the director's cut, that actually leads to something that's pretty much even scarier. Because Dallas actually suffers this horrible fate. But we'll talk about that when it comes up in my notes. Then finally, Ash is revealed to be what he is. A synthetic. I have to say, from the moment he's revealed to be a bad guy, he seems to start malfunctioning. Now, it could be because of that little fight he had with Ripley. It doesn't look to me like he was hit that bad. He was just thrown against the wall, rather lightly from what I can see. But there is a moment there where we see some white blood or whatever, white liquid obviously, run down his face. So maybe he suffered some damage. But he seems to go from being able to fool everyone perfectly to malfunctioning synthetic pretty quickly. I felt like the director was kind of like, okay, so now it's revealed and we might as well go with it. But it can definitely be explained. I have to say, after Ash is dead, the Ash droid doesn't look as human as Ash did as a person. And look, I don't want to complain about that too much. It was 1979. It's amazing that they did what they did. So, but yeah, when he's dead or when his head is knocked off, it doesn't look that realistic for a while. Then when they're talking to him on the table, it's much better again because, I'm pretty sure they just used the actor there. Then again, they split up, and again, it's a really bad idea. And then we have the fight scene. I have to say, this fight scene is just bad. It's just these disjointed scenes. And I think what they were going for is, Ripley, because she's not there. And we mainly, well, not all the time, but at the end, we mainly see the events from her perspective. And, we just see these small scenes from the fight with the alien, but there was one scene that I thought was just actively bad. There's this moment where the alien is supposed to be fighting with the black crew member. I forgot his name, so I'm sorry for identifying him like that, but then they cut to this scene where there's just this blue light, and the alien is just like, and it's just this weird scene where it's like he's floating in outer space and being all awesome, but it doesn't fit with the fight. I thought it was a really weird scene. If you have the movie, check that out, and I'd love to know what you think about that, because To me, that was a really weird moment. That alien just going, you know, and then all of a sudden he has this tail and he pokes holes in people with his mouth. That wasn't that bad. It was just that one scene really that got me where I'm like, what is this? It's almost like, I don't know, maybe they spent so much money on that one scene that the director was like, I'm keeping it in. I don't care if it fits. Something interesting I noticed is that after the last two crew members are killed, not counting Ripley, there's this kind of surreal feeling to the movie. And I only got that feeling after those last two crew members were killed. And it just made me think, wouldn't it be interesting if the director had intended for, you know, if there weren't any sequels, that everything that happens at that moment is just Ripley's mind being, you know, making up stuff and being completely broken because she is now alone with this monster. What if Ripley never got off that ship? She was just dead, or, you know, she was just going insane until the xenomorph found her. Obviously that didn't happen. We've seen the sequels and she's fine. Well, fine, but but I don't know, there's something about the scenes after everyone else is dead that just made me think of that. And I thought it was interesting enough to mention. So then we get to the horrible fate that Dallas suffers. Which is, I think it's called egg forming. Where xenomorphs use DNA from other creatures to hivify their victims. And supposedly they can even turn them into eggs, which is interesting. I'm not sure I love that. At least the egg part. I like the more traditional, xenomorph. Then there's a queen who lays the eggs, and I like that more stable thing. I don't really love the egg forming, but I do like the scary thought of them, you know, turning DNA into their hive. And the fate that Dallas suffers. There's also the other guy, Brent, but I'm pretty sure he's already dead, so at least he doesn't have to suffer through it. But for Dallas to undergo that, to slowly become part of that xenomorph hive, like the wall, that has to be terrible. And I'm not surprised that he's like, kill me. But I have to say, then Ripley kills him with the flamethrower, and I'm like, ooh, fire's a really bad way to go too. Couldn't you have just, smacked him on the head a few times, bashed his brains in? If you're gonna kill me because I'm being, xenomorph formed, at least beat my brains in with something sharp or something heavy. Don't set me on fire. That's a horrible way to go too. But, at least he didn't have to go through that anymore. There's a scene where she's running and she's got the cat carrier, the carrier for the cat. And when she's running, there's clearly no cat in there, because that cat would be screaming as she runs and the whole thing bounces along. It's not a big deal. It doesn't ruin the movie. But as I watched it, I was like, oh, come on, there's no cat in there. You can't do that to a cat. But yeah, I think that's the reason why it seems unreal. She has to run from this murderous alien. But they couldn't actually push a cat into that box. That's just mean. There is an interesting moment where the xenomorph is studying the cat, and then it's just like, meh, and it slaps it away. And it's like, that's interesting. Is the xenomorph not interested in cats? What does that mean? Because I always assumed that xenomorphs would just hunt everything and anything that isn't them. But is that not true? Because later on in another movie, we see a facehugger use a dog. But I don't know if we ever see xenomorphs hunt, animals. You would think that they would have to, but it could be that they only hunt animals when they're hungry. This xenomorph had plenty of people to eat. It didn't need the cat. But that does bring up the question, does the xenomorph have the ability to distinguish between intelligent creatures and animals? I don't know. It's just this moment that leaves a lot of questions, but I think it's interesting. Then Ripley tries to cancel the self-destruct, and I have to ask it, why? Do you expect to win against this creature? At this point, I personally would have been like, okay, I'm gonna leave the self-destruct because this whole thing has gone to hell. And the chances of victory at that point are pretty slim. I'll just take my chances. Because she saw what happened to Dallas. Now this is only in the director's cut, because the scene was cut out of the theatrical movie. But yeah, I would have said, let's leave the self-destruct running, and I'd rather be dead than just facing off with the xenomorph. But that's my personal opinion. Of course, I also would have broken out those guns that were mentioned earlier, but you know. So the refinery and the Nostromo blow up. I have to say, those graphics are just bad. They're just 1979 graphics and they suck. But I don't want to focus on that too much. They did what they could, and it doesn't take me out of the movie. I know it's old. It's still a good movie. I do have to ask, in that final moment on the pod or whatever it is, the escape pod, why is she wearing this little underwear? It's not like the movie is filled with moments where they're trying to make things sexy. But then here, she's wearing these clothes and I'm like, really? Why are you wearing that? Just wear. Because it's almost like her underwear doesn't even fit her. And that just, I don't know. The only thing I could think of is that maybe it was the director's way to distract you somehow from... Maybe they wanted you to think that everything is fine now, and her being in her underwear leaves her really unprotected and gives the idea that it's safe. And then all of a sudden, bam! There it is again. It got on the ship. Then I have one more question. It almost looks like the xenomorph is getting ready to sleep there. Why? It's not done hunting. Ripley is still there. Why isn't it hunting her? And I don't feel like that was ever answered. Unless, what if it's so intelligent that it knows that if Ripley escapes and brings it somewhere else, it can hunt more? But can it be that intelligent? I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting thought enough to share it with you. Then there's one more interesting thing. Is the xenomorph even dead at the end of this movie? Because it crawls into like the exhaust from the shuttle's thrusters. And then it's blown out into space. But I don't think it's dead. We just see it being blown away. I don't at all recall it exploding or anything. So maybe it's just still floating into space. Maybe they never intended for it to die in the first movie. I do have to say that I think in the second movie, she says she killed it by using the thrusters from the ship. And honestly, I feel like they should have killed it there. It should be dead. But I don't know, maybe they just wanted to make it so scary that even that thruster couldn't kill it. But from what I've seen, the xenomorph actually doesn't even die in this movie. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Turned out to be a long video. And if you have any thoughts on, things I've said or about the movie itself, please share them. And again, thanks for watching.